Alrighty, I'm here with Connor Skelly. Connor, how's it going?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm great. Why don't you just tell people a little bit about yourself, how you got into owning your own business, and kind of what your business does a little bit?
So I run a HubSpot support agency, so marketing, sales, and client success operations exclusively for HubSpot businesses. I had a solo consulting business for years, doing everything under the sun when it came to marketing. Started to get more into the operations space with HubSpot, and then almost 2 years ago, decided to stop the solo consultancy game and get into the agency world.
I love it. And overall, what's the current state of your business?
Last year was the first full year of revenue. Goal is to double it this year, and we're ahead of that goal as of right now. And so, yeah, it's going well. Beating our hiring targets too, so I need to catch up on that. But yeah, it's going well.
I love it. And before you started working with us at STAXX, what was the landscape of your business at that point?
There was kind of a solid foundation as far as revenue goes. We got a couple large clients off the bat, but it was like any starting business, you're testing out different softwares or different costs kind of coming in and out pretty quickly, and you're not really sure what's going to stick for a while. So it was unorganized and kind of all over the place.
You're just wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, I mean, I had some, in the case of bookkeeping software, just managing that type of stuff. I had experience with it with my solo consulting business, but it's a different ballgame when, it's not just you.
Totally. So could you compare kind of your processes for the accounting before you started working with us and kind of what the process looks like for you now that we've been together for a little over a year?
I don't really think I ever had a process before working with you all. I would look at, I still do this now, but just look at open invoices, what's coming up, do that on a weekly basis. But as far as tracking expenses, I would just hope and pray that QuickBooks that we used at the time was accurate and was kind of categorizing things. Maybe once a month, I would try to reconcile some stuff and tag things appropriately. But as I've learned, several of the transactions I was tagging was wrong. So, or there's better ways to do it. So, it's just kind of shooting from the hip for the most part, but it wasn't completely off, out of mind. I was definitely conscious of it.
Totally. And from there to now, kind of what's the transformation been and what does that process look like for you now?
Moving from QuickBooks to Xero was amazing for several reasons. One, our invoicing is just a lot cleaner, which is how we invoice clients, and being able to do that automatically and cleanly and having it kind of aligned with all the bookkeeping stuff makes things a lot easier for both myself and for you guys, I'm sure. And the connection, using Xero and then being able to use that with something like Fathom has been super helpful just to provide me the pretty detailed analytics that I need on a monthly basis to make business financial decisions and just understand the health of the business and things like that. I'm still, checking invoices weekly and doing that, but the overall process of doing it is much more straightforward now.
Totally. And you've made a ton of hires in the last handful of months. You've really grown your team pretty aggressively, which has been awesome. Would you say that some of those Fathom reports and those insights has helped you feel more comfortable making some of those hiring decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. The combination of hiring and as of this year, this business is now my sole source of income. The combination of that plus hiring had a lot of kind of questions and worries in my mind of is this sustainable? Can I kind of live the same life that I'm living now off the business income and still have it be in positive growth state? And I would not have been able to answer that without these Fathom reports. I took some accounting courses in college, but I could read a balance sheet and the financial reporting, but I'm more of a dashboard kind of charts guy.
Totally. Us too. It's nice having a more visual representation of your financial performance versus just a PDF full of numbers, right?
Yeah, and getting into just all the different kind of metrics that they have in there, and one, trying not to be distracted with it, which is very easy to do, but just being able to have the templated reports with your guidance on how to use it and how to change things up, and comparing with different KPIs and trend lines, and just that grid thing that they have in there is really helpful just to understand. Someone who's fairly well versed in this kind of stuff, but not full-on professional expert, it does a really good job of telling you here's what the combination of these metrics mean, and here's where your business is trending and overall what is happening in the business. And it's nice to be, even if I know that internally, it's nice to kind of have that bias removed from it and just be hey, here's what this data is telling us about your business. It's really helpful.
Totally. No, I love it. I think we've definitely been able to help out a ton on the financial analysis side, but I think we've also been able to help you out quite a bit on the tax side. I know when you first came over to us, you were just right in the middle of an S Corp election. We just filed your taxes for the first time this past year. So what's kind of your experience been on the tax side of things as well?
I mean, from this filing taxes this year compared to last year, which you guys didn't do last year, but it was just like whiplash. Like last year was probably the worst experience I ever had filing taxes. And it was the first time I did it with an outside firm. Then fast forward to this year, it was the complete opposite. Really organized, like here's everything we need from you all. Like the document that you shared of like, here's a list of all the potential things that you could possibly give us was super helpful. Really responsive with answering questions around like, do I need this for this year? Or like, I have this document, is this good enough type of thing. That was really helpful. And just like the timeliness of it was great. Like didn't have to think about, will my taxes be filed on time? I didn't have to think about that this year, which I did last year. It was a 180 in the best way possible.
There's been a lot of conversations around your S Corp compensation as well, making sure that it's an amount that is optimal and kind of going about the different ways that you can actually go about that S Corp salary. So I think that's been a good value drive too.
Like having the knowledge of like I said, the business is my main source of income now. And like, what can I do with cash as far as like paying myself versus running the payroll, and just the different strategies around that and talking that out with you has been really helpful.
Awesome. I love it. Now, we're at there's a great foundation. We have great processes and system. It's very smooth overall. So could you expand on your time commitment on a monthly basis for us to deliver this for you?
I mean, the amount of time that I spend looking at transactions and like making sure things are tagged appropriately is pretty close to zero. I don't know. I spend maybe 10 minutes towards the end of the month, just like providing context to some transactions where it's needed, but that's like pretty much completely out of my mind now, which is great. Like I said, I'll look at the invoices that are coming out. Maybe I'll send a note to you guys if something's been paid, just so we can like prevent reminders and things like that. And you're really responsive. But the most time I spend is looking at the financial reporting. I spend way too much time looking at that, in the first week of the month for the previous month. The process itself, like managing the data, managing the transactions, all of that, like that's kind of out of my mind at this point. And now the time is spent on actually analyzing the business and making decisions.
Yeah, which is great. And that's exactly what I was going to say, is if you are going to spend time within the accounting and the finance functions of your business, it should be actually analyzing the data so that you can make better decisions versus spending hours worrying and trying to make sure that everything's correct in there, right?
Yeah. Because even if I know what I'm doing, I'm questioning every single thing. So it's best to just not do that for someone in my position.
Totally. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they're looking for accounting or CFO services, they're trying to rationalize the financial ROI. But I would say that the time saving and the reduction of stress is just as big of a ROI. What's kind of your thoughts and experience there?
I completely agree. Like I am, whether it's in the business or myself personally, I am that type of buyer where like, if you could remove just a handful of thoughts or concerns from entering my head, like that's a huge value to me. So as far as like looking for outside vendors for this business, I think you guys are one of the first ones that I brought in, just because it's a combination of time savings or headspace that it's filling up, but also the priority of it. This is definitely a facet of any business that you want to get right early, because then it's just a massive headache. Like you can undo things more or less in a lot of cases, but like that's just so much more work and so much more headache for yourself and the poor soul that you bring in to undo your bad decisions or lack of decisions or lack of data management earlier. So it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I usually tell people that accounting is one of those things that you'd much rather have it a little earlier than you need it and just have it completely done right versus waiting way too long and trying to fix everything that's been blown up pretty much.
I think it's one of those expenses where like you have people that maybe they're brand new to business and it's like the last thing on their mind because they're like, oh, it's fine. The IRS isn't going to pay attention to me, or no one really cares about, like, that's not true. You want to make sure it's right, like constantly. Or like, I think what a lot of business owners, early business owners fall into the trap of like, oh, I can figure this out. Like I know what this stuff is. But there's so many different ways in which you could approach accounting, I guess, like just depending on the type of business or where you're located or whatever the situation is. There's a lot of different advantages or disadvantages to approaching an accounting structure different ways. And you're not going to be an expert on it unless you have a background in finance, right? Which very few like business owners in this space do.
Totally. Yeah. We've never inherited books from a client that when they were doing it themselves where it was correct. Like literally ever. So totally agree there. And one of the things we talk about is we want to tie your financial performance and your tax situation towards your personal goals and what you're trying to do outside of the business. I know you purchased a home in the past year. Kind of how was our service enable you to feel good about that and help you actually, qualify for that mortgage and buy the home?
Probably started with you guys around the same time that I was starting to close on that house. I don't know if it had much of an impact on the actual sale of it, just because it was too early. But the first thing that came to my mind was just what I mentioned this year of the business being my primary source of income, and I've been working with like outside financial planners too, and giving like a broader scope of everything. And I was very hesitant to make that leap because one, I don't want to deplete all the cash in the business just to satisfy myself. And I also personally don't want to change my lifestyle too much, right? I've done that many times and I don't feel like doing it anymore. And so I would ask you and my financial planners kind of like the same questions over and over. And it was just my own anxiety of like, are you sure I can do this? Like, can I do this kind of thing? And let's give it a couple months, pressure test it, that type of thing. And the whole time you were just like, yes, you can do this. And like, here are the million reasons why you can do this, pointing to your financial data, pointing to here's our payroll structure, here's what's going to happen, and just giving me a lot of confidence to be able to do that. So I would say that's definitely like the biggest impact, is giving me a clear and confident understanding of the impact of the business financials in my personal life.
So now that you have this awesome financial foundation, these processes are all dialed in, where do you see your business going the next 6 to 12 months with all of this dialed in?
Next 6 months, hitting, likely exceeding our revenue goals. I think a big focus for me this year is a combination of just managing cash flow with paying myself and just setting a really strong foundation for just like a healthy like cash business and being able to have a lot of flexibility, deploy cash when I want to, things like that. So that's kind of my main goal for this year, is understanding what the new normal looks like with paying myself, along with a massive increase in expenses with new hiring, just seeing what that foundation looks like. And then once that starts to level out, start to use some of all that cash that I'm saving and make larger investments or things like that.
A few more questions. If someone was on the fence about working with us here at STAXX, they know they need an accountant, but they're just not feeling super sure about it, what would you tell them?
Just do it. It doesn't make sense to wait, right? Because you have transactions coming in every day, incoming or outgoing. Like every single day, there is data that needs to be managed by someone that probably shouldn't be you. It's like, I'm in the CRM world. It's the same situation where like every single day where you don't do something is another heap of trash you're adding onto the pile. And then you wait 6 months and now you have this massive landfill. It is definitely one of the expenses in your business that you want to have sorted out sooner rather than later. I understand it can be a tough pill to swallow, especially for early business owners, that they're like, well, this is eating into like a bit of my margin, but that's such a short-term problem when you realize that this is no longer a problem that's on your plate, and you'll be able to make better financial decisions that will ultimately make up that lost margin in the midterm or long term.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, I super appreciate your time. Just one last thing, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to tell someone that's watching this?
I would say the top 2 things that I really appreciate about all of you is just like timeliness of your communication, like super quick at communicating. Even if like you're not going to get me a response right away, you at least acknowledge the message. You're like, hey, we'll get back to you later tonight or tomorrow, whenever it is. I really appreciate that. That is an experience I'm not used to when working with other accountants. When I've worked with a couple in the past, it's a week minimum getting a response. When you're trying to do month-to-month reporting and you have like month-to-month revenue model, you need fast like turnaround on things. And I definitely think you all like understand that very deeply, and it's integrated into your operations. That's one piece of it. The other piece is just the Fathom reporting. Like having that included in your overall cost is immensely helpful, and it's a fun tool to use, and it's like really insightful.
Dude, thanks so much. This was awesome. You've been an awesome client, and I really appreciate you hopping on and telling the world about your experience with us.
Yeah, you got it, Dylan. Anytime.
Thanks.